So, okay, so I'll start with this. So, the city council doesn't really control the education system, and that really falls on the county to some extent and the Board of Education. But let me say that there are ways that we can make sure that we're doing our part, because there is a part for us to do, okay? And so, for instance, the programming that we provide, a lot of times we're partnering with different organizations in the community to make sure that they're providing programming in places like here. So this is actually programmed with the city's Parks and Rec department. I'm sorry, the cookies are going around.
That's distracting.
That's okay. Look, cookies, energy for tonight, so I totally get it. But yeah, so one of the things that we're looking at is how we partner with other organizations, okay? So this particular building, came together through a community partnership. So even though it was part of the school system, the city came in to bring funds into the renovation of this building also. And so then you have a lot of the programming that's going on through the city's Parks and Rec department. And so part of that, again, is the way we work with our community partners to make sure that they have support from us. The other thing, too, is making sure that when we're hiring people in the city that have, a lot of times they have family and they have children in the system, too, making sure that we're looking out for them, okay? Because we're only one community, and so what we do within the city affects their children if they have children in the school system. The other thing is making sure that we have good amenities in the city, okay? So making sure that our teachers who live here can afford the housing that's here, making sure that they have good access to transportation, making sure that whoever their employers are looking out for them and are treating them on an equitable and fair basis. And so really there's it's not a direct the city hires teachers or the city pays teachers, but there are a lot of things that the city can do to support us having a good public education system. So I'll try to keep it short.
Oh, yeah, no. Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I can add to this conversation is, with whatever programming or job training or educational, services that the city provides, one thing that I want to prioritize is making sure that those services and programming and training are targeted as best as possible to the educational and training needs of the folks in the city, and that includes you all. And so, I don't want to be inefficient or waste resources, waste money, and at the same time not serve your needs. And so I think making that connection, making sure those dots meet each other in the middle, is the biggest thing that I want to keep in my mind in terms of supporting our education system.
Thank you. So we're going to go on to our second question. And okay, so our second question is, if you're elected, how will you make public transportation more affordable?
Sure. Yeah. Well, one thing that I've made a priority in this campaign is to advocate for free buses. I think we should do that kind of anyway, so that our bus system is accessible to everyone in the city. But I think if we do our best to push towards having a light rail, and I asked this other time, do you all know what light rail means or what it is? Okay, sure. So it's just like a train, basically. It's like a commuter train. Folks get on it, throughout the day and can ride, around Durham or go to Chapel Hill. Yeah, and so it's something that we're, the city and the county and, folks in Orange County and Chapel Hill are working towards. And I think especially if we can get that in place, it'll give us a lot of room to make a lot of improvements in our bus system. And I think first and foremost, we have to make our buses free, increase the frequency, increase the number of stops we have, increase the number of bus shelters we have so that people aren't waiting in the rain. I think those are the things that I'd like to see happen with our public transportation.
Yeah. And
I'll wait until she's done.
Okay, so all of those things being said, typically a lot of times what you see happen within the city's Department of Transportation, because that's who pretty much handles it, is a lot of times you'll see them hire consultants that'll come in and they'll do a study and they'll say, okay, here's what the needs are, okay? So for instance, one of the things I mentioned over at the other table was the downtown loop. So when we're thinking about how we get to places we want to get to, our school, our parks, our jobs, or the doctor's appointment, one of the things that we're really taking into account is how cars flow, how bicycles flow, and how they do that in a safe manner. And so when we bring in outside people, sometimes they don't understand what's going on here in Durham, like what's really important here in Durham. So one of the things that happened recently was we installed new parking meters. So how many of you have been downtown and seen new parking meters around the city? Yes. And so unfortunately, we had some of those go up near a senior center. Okay, so even though we may have had someone come in to say, hey, we should put in parking meters and we should make these sorts of changes, there wasn't really this sort of in-depth look into how these changes affect our community. Okay, so we had seniors who are on fixed incomes. Okay, and all of a sudden it's, well, now we got to pay for parking, and we're trying to go to senior programs, and we're on fixed income because we're not working anymore, you know. We're retired most of the time. And so really, when we're looking at all of these different things, a lot of times it really goes back to going directly to the community and making sure they're involved. And so it can't just be hiring someone to do a study. It can't just be having our city council meetings. It has to be, how do we go back out into the community to find out what the actual public transportation needs are, like the shelters. One big issue has also been routes, making sure that the routes are going where they're supposed to be going, where people actually need them to go, how often they need them to go, are they running on time. My husband actually takes the bus from North Parking Garage to downtown Raleigh. And so he pulls it up on his phone to see where his bus is. If his bus is not there, he's emailing people within a minute asking why not. So, I mean, you know, part of that, when you're talking about getting to jobs or getting to a doctor's appointment, it becomes very, very important to make sure that we have these things in place. So that's it.
Okay, so we have a third question. Hunter, do you want to ask about the dog parks?
Ooh, dog parks.
I was actually going to continue off of this subject, but
Okay, you can go and continue on the subject.
I just want to say, do you think it is, so what do you think would be the biggest problem with trying to make, like, the biggest, hardest part of making it more accessible? Making the public transportation more accessible?
Money.
Yeah, that supplies.
Money.
And I also think if people had to pay, they wouldn't be getting their money's worth because traffic is unpredictable a lot of the time. I mean, sometimes you can understand what's about to happen. But it's not unpredictable.
Totally.
Yeah,
Totally
I think.
agree.
Yeah, yeah. Money's a big issue, but I think sometimes we're so busy looking at the numbers. You know, we're looking at what the cost is going to be in terms of the cost to the budget, or what the expenses are to run the buses, and the fact that, hey, you know, this bus system isn't paying for itself in terms of what people are paying. And we don't take into account the human cost in terms of, hey, look, people are riding these buses for a reason. They're trying to get to work, or they're trying to get to the doctor's appointment, or they're trying to get to the library so that they can look up jobs on the computer. There's not a price that you can pay on that. Okay, that price is a human benefit, and a lot of times I think that's undervalued. We need to value that more.
So do you want to ask about the dog parks?
Oh yeah, I definitely, this isn't just specific to dog parks, this is specific to literally every kind of park. But I just want to ask, is there a way that we could expand dog parks, or really any kind of park, or kind of expand on them and also just to, like, create more and also expand on the older ones? Because I noticed that all the time we don't have too many people going to the public parks if they can.
What would you like to see change with the dog parks that are here?
Well,
Like,
we need
how
more.
do we make them better?
Or if we're not going to get more, we need to expand them more.
Okay.
That's definitely a big problem,
Yeah.
for at least for me, because we don't have a good range between each dog and really any kind of public play area for adults, kids, or dogs.
Yeah. No. Yeah. That's a great point.
Are there cat parks?
I don't know, but maybe there should be.
I think so.
Most cats would probably just hang out by themselves in the corners of cat parks.
So we're asking, how would you maybe increase the amount of dog parks or parks in general and improve the quality of them?
Sure. Well, I think all of our public amenities should be of equal quality and of high quality and of equal quality. Be environmentally safe. And serve the needs of the community. So if the community, is saying, we need to see improvements in our dog parks, I think it's our obligation as, city leadership to do that.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
As our current parks are, some of the 5 minutes?
I think some of the ones that are around, like, there's this neighborhood I've been to, and their only park is really bad. My neighborhood has a good one, but
Yeah.
they usually
Yeah, and that's a huge issue across the city. Unfortunately, like some parks are great and some aren't, and that doesn't seem fair to kids like you all, who are living all across the city and want to do the same things, in all of our parks. So everyone should have this is the same kind of good experience. So.
And I think like parks are really important because nowadays people want to be on their phones and stuff, and they don't really want to get outside.
Yeah.
And so with more parks and better parks, people will want to go outside more and run around and play and get more exercise.
I think you're totally
So
right.
let me say this, because you can do something about that. Okay, so down on I guess Mangum Street, the city owned some vacant land there, and the people in the community came to the city and said, we want a dog park there. Okay, so that's how that dog park got there. So if there are things you want to see in your city, you bring those ideas forward to city council and you say, this is what we would like to see in our community. If we don't hear from you, we won't necessarily know, because we're not really good at reading minds, and I don't have a crystal ball.
I've got one.
Okay, she's got one. But yeah,
Wait.
so yeah, so that's the big thing. Like, that wouldn't even be there had it not been from people in the community who stepped up and said, that's what we want. So in addition to doing that, also, what's your name? I'm sorry. Hunter, okay, working with partners, because remember I said what was the number one issue to doing anything about that? It was money okay. So working with community partners who might be willing to take on some of the maintenance and repair that may go on. A lot of times you're going to have agreements with other people if they want to take care of it, but there's no reason for us to say we can't do it. It's just a matter of us saying, how do we get it done?
Leela has one more question she wants to get in, because this is a question from, we had the 15 young people who are awaiting trial in Durham County Jail and receiving services there. Ask some questions for you and write some essays about what they thought about city government.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So here's the question that they asked. They asked, how would you make it easier for you to get jobs after jail?
Yes.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, well, one thing, so I'm a criminal defense attorney by training, so I've spent years representing folks, who have been in jail, have been in prison, most of whom who are on North Carolina's death row. And something that, I've learned through that work is that, a lot of my clients have had great skills, like whether it's just that they've finished high school, or they've, learned how to become a mechanic, they've learned how to become a barber, or they've learned some other skill that, without a record would give them the opportunity to work, a full-time job and earn a living. But because they have a record, because they have some blemish according to the courts, they're unable to get a green light or be allowed to work in a particular job. And so I think that there are things that we as a city can do to create, exceptions essentially, or some sort of exemption for folks, or incentivize our vendors and the people that work with the city to hire people who have records, and help them overcome the barriers that are in place, because of a state law, or because of even a local law or some local restriction that keeps them from doing a job that they're very well qualified for. So that's something that's been kind of on my mind for years, and I'd love to see us do work at the local level and at the state level to change.
So, I'll try to make it fast. Yeah. And so, Vernetta and I are both attorneys, and so I work in a little bit different capacity. And so, a lot of the people that I'm working with sometimes who have been in prison and are then getting out are trying to get jobs too. But a lot of times they're also trying to start businesses, because that's what I do a lot of. I help people start businesses, and they run into some of those same roadblocks you just mentioned: licensing issues. Try getting a loan and convincing a bank that you're a good prospect to lend to, okay? So there are a lot of obstacles that just make it hard for them, not just to get a job, but even to start a business on their own, okay? So one of the things, one of the programs that the city has had in place has been to hire some people who have had who've been in prison before. And one of my friends that I grew up with went through that program and was hired to work for the city. So that is not just a stepping stone for them, but it is a livelihood for them, because that has enabled them to then have income to be able to pay for